The air inside the debriefing chamber was heavy, not with atmosphere, but memory. Varnak exhaled slowly, the ridges of his mandibles twitching beneath the softened metal of his exosuit. His eyes, like burning embers soaked in amber fluid, stared past the interrogator's lens and into a place far older, far bloodier. He did not speak at first. Words were for the living, and most of those in his mind were long since ash. "You want a story?" he said, the translator barely catching the weight of sorrow in his tone. "Fine, I'll give you the first one, the one that mattered." It began on the moons of Halcor V, where the air shimmered in perpetual twilight and the soil bled green under their boots. Varnak had been a younger then, rankless, reckless, proud. He and his unit, the 17 Clade Vanguard, were deployed to scout and destabilize a human colony whose presence had violated the Rukari Accord. At least, that's what command told them. The truth, as it often does in war, was a ghost hiding in smoke. He remembered the first sight of them. Humans, smaller than expected, softer in form, with eyes that never looked away when stared into. That was the unsettling part. Predators knew when to break eye contact. These humans didn't, not out of dominance, but defiance. There was something feral in their stillness. The first engagement was clean, surgical, a night raid. 3 human outposts neutralized before dawn. Varnak's claws still remembered the texture of human gear. Strange polymers, too light to be reliable. And yet they worked. He had underestimated them. They all had. By the 4th cycle, everything changed. The humans had adapted. Somehow, their technology remained crude compared to collectives, but their tactics shifted like water under pressure. Varnak's unit stumbled into an ambush outside the mineral fields of Sector 19. 6 of his brothers lost in under 4 minutes. Plasma bolts lit the sky like shattered suns, but it was a silence between blasts that haunted him. The humans didn't scream when they killed. They didn't roar in victory. They just advanced. Efficient, focused. And then there was her. She wasn't large by their standards. Medium build, matte armor, eyes like cracked ice. Varnak only saw her face once, through a broken visor and dying flames. She didn't flinch when his blade struck the ground beside her. She only looked at him, unblinking, and fired. The bolt grazed his left eye. The wound cauterized instantly, but the burn would never leave. He remembered falling back, alone, carrying the last of his unit's identifiers. He didn't remember how long he wandered in that cratered terrain, but it felt like eternity. Eventually, the retrieval ship found him, or what was left of him. They called the battle a success. Strategic extraction, repositioning. But among the soldiers, it was known as the burn of Halcor. Varnak was reassigned to high-priority analysis units, war bands that studied enemy evolution patterns. But he was never quite the same. He started asking questions, ones that didn't sit well with command. Why were humans always one step ahead, when under pressure? Why did they never retreat the way others did? Why did their eyes, even in death, still seem to watch you? He found no answers in data, only in memory. His next encounter with the same human unit, confirmed by insignia fragments, was on the drifting cities of Refine's wake. This time they were prepared, or so they believed. Airlocks breached, corridors flooded with methane gas, synthetic gravity flipped twice. The humans still prevailed. Varnak saw comrades lose their minds in the chaos, firing at reflections and echoes. The humans used the terrain like it was an extension of their bodies. It was in the tunnels, beneath the city core, that he saw her again. This time, he recognized her by movement, fluid but sharp, like a blade cutting through fog. She moved ahead of her squad, sweeping hallways like a ghost. Varnak followed, unseen, his breath shallow, pulse unreadable. He had orders to flank, to signal his team. But he didn't. Not yet. He wanted to see her again, up close, to understand what made her more terrifying than the rest. She paused near a collapsed fusion core, scanned the area, then spoke, barely audible, but the translator caught it. They're watching. Let them. He should have struck then. His blade was primed, edges pulsing. But something held him. Curiosity? Hesitation? He didn't know. The moment passed. Her team arrived. He vanished into the dark. That failure cost him 3 more brothers and a command reprimand. Still, the moment stayed with him, not as a mark of shame, but a clarity. Humans fought like animals, but they died like gods. Later, in captivity, Varnak would study ancient Terran myths. Prometheus, Odysseus, Arjuna. He saw pieces of them in the soldiers he faced, mortals wrapped in myth by their refusal to surrender to fate. He shifted in his seat now, the metal of his armor groaning softly. "You still want to hear this?" he asked the interrogator. No reply, just the silent red light of the recorder. Good, because Halcor and Refine were just preludes. He leaned forward, and for a moment his expression changed. Not rage, not sorrow. Recognition. A soldier speaking of another. She was called Captain Roan. Human Tactical Division 93. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a monster. She was something worse. He paused, his next words measured, deliberate. She made me doubt everything I was told. There was a long silence, the kind that weighed more than noise ever could. Varnak looked into the lens once more. "I'm not here to justify. I'm here to remember. And what comes next, that's where the real war began." Then he leaned back, the light dimming on his face. Somewhere deep in the walls of the ship, a sophom of power cycled through, echoing like a heartbeat. He closed his eyes. The memories were awake again, and the story was far from over. The chamber lights dimmed as the record resumed. Varnak didn't move for several seconds, as if part of him had calcified in thought. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to the interrogator or to the recording. It was to himself. Quiet, grave, a whisper delivered more to the dead than the living. "I began to dream of her." He spoke without shame, without flourish. "Roan, captain of Earth's TD-93. In the dreams, she wasn't always armed. Sometimes she stood beneath a ruined star, watching it bleed across the sky. Sometimes she was laughing. That was the worst part. She laughed like someone who already knew the outcome." Varnak had seen battle horrors before. Species broken by war, entire planets stripped to bone. But nothing prepared him for what war did on the inside. It gnawed, slow and clever, never where you expected. You could repair limbs. You couldn't cauterize guilt. The war pulled him back to the frost fields of Valtrax Sigma, where atmospheric storms carved grooves into the landscape deeper than fortresses. Here, the Collector believed they would finally corner Roan's unit, worn down and isolated. Varnak had read her strategies: adaptation through terrain, erratic signal patterns, decoy bodies rigged with explosives. She was playing chess while most commanders were stabbing in the dark. This time, Varnak wasn't sent to kill. He was sent to observe, to learn her, to break her if he could. The mission began with shadows. Recon units whispered through caves and ice ducts, silent and faceless. Within the first solar cycle, 2 squads went dark. The survivors raved about voices in the storm, footsteps that never echoed, and sudden silence that turned into blood. Then Varnak found her symbol. A single line slashed through a circle, etched in soot on a collapsed mining rig. Roan's mark, not an official sigil, something personal. A message. He realized then she wanted them to follow. The psychology was brutal. She let her enemies chase ghosts, weigh themselves down in weather that clawed at armor seals and logic alike. He admired it, even envied it. But admiration didn't mean mercy. He ordered a new approach. No pursuit, no ambush. He waited, starved the bait. And finally, on the 3rd night, Roan struck. Not at him. At the rearmost unit in his command chain, the one she knew he'd watched the least. Precision strikes, not a bullet wasted. When he reviewed the footage, her team never raised their voices. Only hand signals. Controlled chaos. He watched her again through surveillance optics. She moved like someone with nothing left to lose, but everything to protect. That night, Varnak didn't dream. He remembered one of his sub-commanders, Jirith, cornering him in private after the raid. "She fights with vengeance," Jirith said. "That makes her predictable." "No," Varnak had replied. "It makes her inevitable." The 2 commanders clashed days later during the final siege of Valtrax's communications citadel. It wasn't a battle, not truly. It was a series of collapses, like dominoes tipping inward. He saw Roan again, this time not from shadows, but face to face across a broken corridor strewn with the bodies of both their kind. Her rifle was empty. His claws were slick with blood. They didn't speak. There was no point. She ran. He chased. Through smoke, through flame, through echoing chambers littered with sparks and dying lights, until finally she reached a dead end, and stopped, not with panic, not with fear. She just waited. He approached slow, weapon ready, each step louder than the last. Then she did something unexpected. She sat down, back against the wall, weapon on the ground, breathing heavy but steady. And she looked at him, not as an enemy, as a mirror. "I'm tired," she said. Varnak paused. One more step, and it would be over. He'd earned it. She was cornered, defeated, but something in her voice, soft, almost human, even to the translator, froze him. "I know who you are," she continued. "Varnak. They talk about you. The one who studies, not just fights. You want to know why we keep surviving? It's because we don't believe in surviving." His grip tightened. "Explain." "We die for each other. Not orders. Not planets. Each other. You fight for command. We fight for the person next to us. That's the difference." He didn't respond. He couldn't. His training, his culture, none of it prepared him for surrender that felt like defiance. Roan stood then, slow and deliberate, palms open. "Do it. Finish it. Or start listening." The corridors trembled. Explosions above. The battle continued around them. But in that narrow space, time hesitated. He lowered his weapon. Not fully. Not in weakness. In acknowledgement. He turned and walked away. She did not follow. Command called it a failure. They said the Citadel loss was due to terrain instability. Varnak didn't argue. He didn't report the meeting. Some things weren't for records. But the dreams came back. Different now. He no longer saw her as a threat. He saw her as the reason he still felt anything at all. War took away names, replaced them with titles, numbers, ranks. But she remained Roan in his mind, a singular presence that made the galaxy feel smaller. In time, his own kind began to suspect. A soldier who hesitated, who studied humans too closely, who failed to execute a known target. He was reassigned, interrogated, watched. Still, he said nothing. Until today. Until this room. "I'm telling you this," Varnak said, leaning closer to the lens, "because I need someone to understand what it means when your enemy starts living in your conscience. It's not guilt. It's revelation." The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was pause. A quiet preparing for what must come next. He looked at the far wall, as if seeing beyond steel and gravity wells. "I spared her. She spared me, not out of mercy, but because we knew the real enemy wasn't each other." His voice dropped into a near growl, as though afraid the truth might collapse under its own weight. The real enemy was obedience. He closed his eyes, and somewhere through the ship's distant hum came the unmistakable sound of a storm rising. The ship trembled with distant motion, the kind that passed through metal before it reached the senses. Varnak felt it in his bones. Old reflexes stirred. Once, he would have checked for breach points, reinforced his armor, scanned for life signatures. Now he sat still, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere far beyond the cold walls of the interrogation cell. "She found me again," he said at last, voice quieter than before, almost reverent, "but not on a battlefield. That was the last time we ever saw one another in war. It happened on the colony remains of Dalis, 9, a former neutral zone rendered lifeless by solar flare fallout. Varnak had been sent not as a soldier, but as a liaison, part of a cross-species observation treaty born from exhaustion more than peace. Neither side had won. Neither had surrendered. The war had simply slowed, its fires turned to embers. Roan was there, too, no longer in armor. She wore a civilian-grade suit, the kind issued to retired personnel who were still considered assets. Her hair had grown longer, her face marked with age and attrition, but her eyes, Those same unyielding, glacier-cut eyes had not changed. They didn't speak at first, just stood among the ruins, the wind stirring ash into small cyclones around them. "You're limping," she said after a time, her voice still carrying the bite of observation. "Old injury," Varnak replied. "Halcor?" "No, you." The corner of her mouth lifted. Not a smile, an acknowledgement. They explored the ruins together, wordless for a while, until they came across a data pod, half buried under rubble. Roan brushed it free and handed it to him. "Do you know what this place was?" she asked. "A sanctuary," he said. "For civilians." "Yes." She looked out across the shattered skyline, at the twisted spires of once homes and learning halls. This is what happens when war outlasts memory. People forget who they were before it. Varnak hesitated before asking, "And who were you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a small data chip from a pouch at her belt and offered it. He took it without question. "It's a record," she said. "Names, dates, places. Everyone I lost. Everyone I couldn't save. I thought someone should carry it who remembers." "I remember," he said. "I know." They didn't part like comrades. Not like enemies, either. They simply walked in opposite directions when the last sun dipped behind the horizon. No promises. No farewells. Back on his ship, Varnak accessed the chip. As promised, it was a ledger of loss. But it also held something unexpected. Roan's voice, recorded over time. Not orders, not reports. Thoughts, doubts, regrets. Moments of silence punctuated by breaths, as though she couldn't bring herself to speak some truths aloud. One line stood out. "If I die, let it be with eyes open." Varnak kept that phrase with him, etched into his helm's inner lining, not as a mantra, as a reminder. The interrogator's voice interrupted the silence now. Synthetic clipped. "Why are you telling us this?" Varnak looked up slowly. "Because you're preparing for war again, and you still don't understand the cost. You defected," the voice said. "No," he replied. "I evolved." A long pause. Then, "You empathize with them." "With humans?" Varnak didn't blink. "I learn from them. There's a difference. Are you loyal to the collective?" "I am loyal to those who bleed beside me. That includes enemies if they bleed true." There was static. Recalibration. "Final question," the voice said. "Would you fight again?" This time, he took longer to respond. His fingers curled into the faint lines of his palm, scars worn smooth with time. "Yes," he said, "but not like before." He leaned forward, eyes igniting again, not with rage, but purpose. "I would fight for what comes after. For what's left when war is done. Someone has to." Outside, klaxons began to rise. Something was happening on the ship. Movement. Alarms. Voices rose in the hall. But Varnak remained still. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in cycles, saw a future. A barren field not of ruins, but of growth. Not ashes, but seedlings. And standing there, watching him from across the divide of time and memory, Roan. Still defiant. Still unbroken. Still alive in him. The door to the cell slid open with a hiss, light flooding in. But he didn't shield his eyes. He rose. He walked. And this time, he did not look back.